Hi, this is Victoria Nalule, and here with me again is Mr. Stephen Dow. He is a senior lecturer in energy law at the Center for Energy, Petroleum, Mineral Law and Policy at the University of Dundee. In our previous videos, we covered gas contracts. We also talked about liberalization in the energy sector. In this video, we're going to focus on renewable energy. But before we start, I'd like Mr. Stephen Dow to briefly introduce himself again.
Hi, I'm Stephen Dow. I'm Senior Lecturer in Energy Law at the Centre for Energy, Petroleum, Mineral Law and Policy at the University of Dundee. I've done this for just over 20 years. I've taught all around the world. I've taught students from 50 plus countries. I've advised governments, I've advised companies, and sometimes they've even taken my advice. And that's probably enough of an introduction.
Thank you very much, Stephen Dow, for the introduction. And as I mentioned in my previous video, he has been supervising me. He lectured me in 2013 and 2014, so you definitely need to hear from him.
Too much.
Yeah. In this video, we want to focus on renewable energy, and I'll just ask one question, and then you can take us through the question and also add other things. So the question is, what methods can countries employ to support high-cost renewable energy?
We always assume that renewables are high cost, and that has been true in history. But as we go forward, as technology improves and as production methods improve, the cost will come down. So eventually renewables will make it into the market. Either the cost will come down far enough, or simply the market price will come up high enough and renewables will be paid for by the market. But you have to get there, and that is the key for renewables. You have to understand that this is temporary. It could be quite a few years, maybe decades, but it will eventually be temporary. So you have to have a way in, and you also have to have a way out to let the market take over for renewables eventually. The ways to do it. Fundamentally, the first way that countries have done it is they have had no liberalisation at all, and the state has done it. So you saw, for example, nuclear, assuming that nuclear is renewable. That's an interesting debate. You saw nuclear supported that way, you saw the first wind farm supported that way, you saw the first solar farm supported that way. To do it in a market is a little bit different. In essence, you have two choices. You can have a fixed premium for renewables, a feed-in tariff, or alternatively you can have a variable premium in which essentially the generator bids the subsidy they want to do, a so-called tradable green certificate. In the UK this is known as a ROC, the Renewable Obligation Certificate. And in essence what a ROC does is it says, I will bid how much subsidy I need to do this activity. And so it has a time limit on it, and it makes sure that during that period you just get paid a bit more for the electricity. Remember, however, you only get a subsidy in that system if you actually generate the unit of electricity. So if the wind doesn't blow and you don't generate anything from your wind farm, you don't get a subsidy either, which at least encourages you to put wind farms where it's windy, which can only be a good thing. So you need to produce in order to get that subsidy. You also get the subsidy from a different place. You sell the power into the market, or you sell it on the long-term contract to your buyer. The buyer pays you under the contract. You then go to the system as a whole, and you get the subsidy paid by the system as a whole. And there are various different ways of doing that. But the basic idea behind it is that there's a compulsory purchase of that power. And the supply companies, the buyers of electricity, the wholesale buyers of electricity, must buy that power. And they must pay the premium, whether it is a fixed premium under the feed-in or whether it's a variable premium under the tradable green certificate. They must pay that premium. And if they don't, they are charged the amount of money anyway. And in that way, there's always a pool of money to pay for generators, who are expensive, and to encourage generators to build yet more capacity. And that's terribly important, that you understand that subsidy systems aren't just about the people who are there right now, they're also about encouraging new people into the system. That tends to assume that we're talking about on-grid renewables, and increasingly renewables are the solution off-grid. Village grids, small areas, to rather than extend the grid into what would otherwise be a rural environment. Governments are increasingly thinking, well, it's too expensive to to build more grid. What we'll do instead is we'll build a mini grid in the village and we'll power it from solar, renewables, whatever. It's better than what goes on at the moment, is essential thinking. The question then becomes how you socialise those additional costs, because the people in the village would otherwise be paying a very high price for electricity. But if they were paying the full cost for all that power, there has to be a method to make sure that someone other than just the people in the village are paying the cost, a cost socialisation scheme. Whether it goes to all electricity consumers, whether it goes to taxpayers, whether it goes to some form of grant through the World Bank or whatever it might be, the answer will vary from country to country. But in essence, renewables need that time limit, they need a mechanism, and it needs to be simple. And we're seeing at the moment that the simplest mechanisms are feed-ins, because the government simply says, this is the amount of money we're going to subsidise, that's it, take it or leave it. And as long as they get the amount right, and clearly places like Spain, Germany have got the amount very right because they've built a lot of power, maybe they've paid too much, but at least for paying too much they got a lot of capacity built. But as long as you get the amount right, people will come and people will build. And that is the trick. But remember, you pay for the power separately from the subsidy.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Stephen Dow. Maybe we can highlight on the issue of overcapacity, especially in renewable energy, like what happened in Spain. Is it something that is likely to happen in developing countries?
The huge amount of building in Spain of renewables occurred simply because the feed-in level, the actual value of the feed-in, was extremely high compared to the electricity price. Okay. And so people built renewables because it got lots of money. Was there too much? Well, not really. There was just more than was expected. And you can see that the same is true around the world, where governments have bid, say, here's my feed-in value, come and bid me a gigawatt. In Argentina a couple of years ago, what happened was they said, here's the amount of feed-in, bid me a gigawatt. They got a huge amount more than that bid into the system, and they chose the cheapest part to get the gigawatt, and they then said, well actually, we want more than that gigawatt of power. What we'll do is we'll accept more than those bids, and we'll have 2, maybe it was even 3 gigawatts of power built. So too much power is a very odd concept, because it's very country specific. If you have too much power, you simply either don't generate it, because remember you can't store power, or alternatively you switch off some of the, if you've got so-called too much renewables, you just switch off the coal plants or you switch off the gas plants or something like that.
All right. Thank you very much, Mr. Stephen Dow. That marks the end of our third video on renewable energy. The next one we shall be discussing about project finance in electricity sector. Stay tuned.
Thank you.